Good morning, good people. Whether you're here with us in person or on Zoom, we welcome you to this morning's service. If you would rise in body or spirit, body and spirit potentially, to sing Gather the Spirit, 347. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour, the trials in this life appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, led by the moon and fed by the stars, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
Good morning. Welcome to our Sunday service. If you're here in person or celebrating online, we are glad to be with you. I'm Celia Buckley, serving as Worship Associate. Reverend Lucy is preaching today, and her topic is Aging Well. Our all-ages camp is happening this weekend, and about 75 members of our community are up in Alta enjoying the great outdoors. The mission of this congregation says we come together to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world. Toward this end, we honor the Nishinan, Southern Maidu, and Miwok peoples for their enduring commitment to steward this land where UUSS exists. We recognize they have never ceded, left, nor ceased to care for this land. For those of you on Zoom, if you'd like to follow what's happening today with an order of service, you can click on the link in the chat box. For those in the room, it's on the table at the back. Our Blue Sheet weekly announcement will give you all the information you need to know about what's happening this week and what's coming up later. And if you are new, the Blue Sheet can be an important guide to find activities of interest to you. You can find it on that back table and also a link in the chat on our website. Our weekly message comes out by email every Friday with announcements and a note from one of our two ministers, and it's on our website. We are also happy to send you it via email if you fill out a newcomer's form, again, either by chat in the link in the chat or at the back welcome table after the service. I have a couple of announcements. What would UUSS be without announcements? The first one is the racial justice team is hosting a conversation about inclusion with UUSS members who identify as Black, Indigenous, or as a person of color, BIPOC. If you identify as such a person and want to participate in this conversation, please contact the racial justice team at racialjustice@uuss.org. And another important announcement is UUSS is holding its first General Assembly watch party. This means you do not have to go to Pittsburgh to attend General Assembly.
What's General Assembly?
General Assembly is a gathering. There's a voice behind me. General Assembly is the gathering of Unitarian Universalist congregations from throughout the Northern Hemisphere and probably beyond. And we are an associate member of the congregation, and that is where important work that affects the denomination is performed, voted upon, and also there are usually a variety of activities that you can attend in person or online that reflect our commitment to social justice values, taking care of our earth, climate justice, financial interests, and many, many more things than I have written down in front of me, because I don't have anything written down in front of me. Marion and I have been to General Assembly at least 7 times, and it's lots of fun. So you don't have to travel this year to go to Pittsburgh, and instead you can come right here to UUSS. He'll get it. And sit in fellowship with members of this congregation. And more information will be coming about when and where to meet. The opening celebration is on June 21st at 3 p.m., and there's no cost to attend this watch party. So that's great news. And now please take out your cell phone. And if you think it's off, it may not be. Okay? If you have it on silent, your alarms and reminders to take your pills will still alarm. So please turn it all the way off so that we can all be present and enjoy this service here today without distraction. Again, welcome everyone, and please enjoy music for centering.
Thank you, Irina. That was beautiful. Good morning. Thanks for being here. Hello to all you Zoom folks. Celia's going to light our chalice this morning after I share these words from the Reverend Christine Robinson. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life that we share together.
It's that time for kiddos of our congregation to go ahead and gather on up here before we send you on your way to continue your service as we sing. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and read with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. I know you're scared. And I'm scared too. But here I am. Right next to you. You gotta put one foot in front of the other one. One foot, and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other one foot, and lead with love.
Let's take a deep breath together. Let it out with a sigh. And another one, and let it out with a sigh of all the things you want to get rid of from the week past. And what was that? And one more deep breath to settle us into our time together this morning. Our prayer this morning comes from the Reverend Jane Blackall. Please join me in the spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and love, in whom we live and move and have our meaning. As we turn our attention to the depths of this life, the cosmic wisdom and mystery that abides in all that is, we tune in to your holy presence within us and among us. In these strange and often unsettling times, there is a lot of change and confusion in the air. A lot for us to cope with, which we wouldn't have chosen. We face each day, each hour, each mood that arises in us as best as we can. We may often find ourselves fearful, lonely, irritable, frustrated, or just plain weary. There may also be precious moments, at least, of consolation, uplift, and peace. In the quiet of this hour, may each person find what they need most to face the days ahead. And as we look back over the past week, let us silently give thanks for those joys and pleasures we have known. Moments of love and friendship. Experiences of wonder and delight, reassurance and relief. Bursts of playfulness, spontaneity, and generosity. all those times when we felt most alive and awake. Spirit of life, we also ask now for consolation, forgiveness, and guidance we may need as we acknowledge our sorrows and regrets. Times of loss, pain, anger, and fear. Periods of uncertainty and anxious waiting. Realization of our own weakness, our mistakes, and our failures. Awareness of missed opportunities, those things left unsaid or undone. Those moments when we struggled and felt like a mess. Expanding our circle of concern, let us bring to mind those people, places, and situations that are in need of prayer right now, and hold them in the light. Maybe friends or loved ones, those closest to our heart. Maybe those we find difficult or where there's a conflict. Or those we don't know so well, who we've heard about in the news. Spirit of love, Spirit of life, we offer up our joys and concerns, our hopes and fears, our beauty and our brokenness, and call on you for insight, healing, and renewal. As we look forward now to the coming week, help us to live well each day and to offer our best selves, using our unique gifts in the service of love, justice, and peace. So may it be. Blessed be. And now let us take a moment of silence for our own private reflections. Amen.
If you would rise in by your spirit to sing 317, We Are Not Our Own. We are not our own, earth for
and strangers, show us who we are. Therefore let us make thanksgiving, and with justice willing and aware, give to earth and all things living liturgies of care. Let us be a house of welcome, living stone upholding living stone, gladly showing all our neighbors we are not our own.
I have a reading to share with you today that I'm very pleased to offer. It is from a member of our congregation who's quite a prolific author, and her name is Marilyn Reynolds. And she published this book in 2012, and it's called Over 70, and I Don't Mean MPH, Reflections on the Gift of Longevity. And this chapter in her book, and I'm going to read you a good excerpt from, is entitled The Gifts of Longevity. There are less easily described gifts that go along with longevity. I've grown comfortable with just being me. Comfortable in my own skin, to use today's vernacular. I'm not saying I can no longer be sorry for some thoughtless remark or embarrassed by an unplanned fart. I don't especially like to fart in company, but as with other middle oldsters, farts happen. So, if anyone thinks that's worth a second thought, then they don't have enough to think about. Forgiveness is another one of those precious intangible gifts. For decades, I kept remnants of anger tucked away in a tiny treasure chest and buried in the dark side of my heart. I sometimes like to lift the lid on the chest and revisit anger. There was anger at my father for drinking himself into an early grave, anger at my mother for her boozy, whiny neediness, anger at my first husband for doing me wrong. Then one day when I went to visit my treasure, the anger was gone. I looked in the corners of the chest. I even ripped out the lining, but it was nowhere to be found. I dragged the chest out into the light to get a better look. It had to be in there somewhere. But it wasn't. Besides that, not only was the anger gone, it had been replaced by gratitude. When I was a child, my father read to me and joked around with me. He taught me that being honest, holding fast to one's good name, was all important. Gratitude for his gifts to me overcame anger at his weakness. My mother took good care of me physically and my physical needs, and I grew up healthy. She also offered a powerful example of what practices and attitudes to avoid in my own mothering style. No small gift. As for my first husband, it's true he did me wrong, but no other DNA combination would have produced the two unique and irreplaceable daughters that we started together. For that, I am ever grateful. Maybe the best part of forgiveness is that I forgive myself for the uncomfortable big and small mistakes I've made. That's not to say I'm happy with them all, but I know that I, like most everyone else, have done and am doing the the best I know to do. The years have taught me to accept reality. Although I'm not a believer, I've said the Serenity Prayer enough that sometime over the past few decades, it sank in. As an agnostic, I dropped the God part of the prayer and skip right to grant me the serenity. I hope that deletion saves me from hypocrisy. The idea of working to change what I can change and accepting the things I can't change is so common that it seems trite. I don't care. It keeps me from spending precious energy tearing my hair out over the unchangeables. My hair that is unchangeably less than thick and luxurious, but it is acceptable. I suppose the more up-to-date equivalent of accepting the things we cannot change is, it is what it is. Oops. This simple supposition has led to an extreme case of dilly-dallying and shilly-shallying that has sucked the time out of my morning. First, I decided to see if it is what it is in fact more up-to-date than the Serenity Prayer. This led me to a 2004 article from USA Today referring to the phrase as a sports cliché and quoting numerous coaches and athletes as proof. I don't watch sports. The sports section of the newspaper is recycled without a glance along with the ads. And the topic of sports comes up in conversations with my friends just a little less often than string theory. I was certain it is what it is reached far beyond sports talk. I searched for evidence to support my opinion. When I admitted how incompetent I am with modern technology earlier in the book, did I mention the Google exception? I can Google. In fact, one thing often leads to another, and I Google all day and far into the night. There are times when I behave like those rats that are given 2 buttons to push. One releases food, and the other one activates the pleasure centers in their brains. Given the choice, the rats frantically and repeatedly choose to press the pleasure stimulation lever over the lever that releases food and water, ultimately dying of dehydration and exhaustion. So far, I always take a break from Googling for food and drink. But it was before breakfast this morning when I started the It's What It Is searches, and I'm on the verge of Googling straight through lunch. Anyway, have you noticed that people under the age of 50 say anyways? What's about that? Anyway, the amateur internet word buffs claimed a wide variety of origins. One said the phrase was first used in 1999 by some football coach. First used in 1999, I don't think so. Another referred to a letter sent by a hermit, Noah John Rondeau, to the editor of an Adirondack mountain newspaper back in early 1930s. He ended his letter with, "It is what it is." So, to the stupid idea that 1999 was the first use of the phrase. Even so, in one form or another, the Serenity Prayer has been around much longer. Clear back in 1695, Mother Goose said, "For every ailment under the sun, there is a remedy or there is none. If there be one, try and find it. If there be none, never mind it." The first written record of today's version of the Serenity Prayer was in a widely circulated sermon by American theologian Karl Reingold Niebuhr, 1892 to 1971. Shortly after the publication of that sermon, Alcoholics Anonymous began using the prayer in the 12-step programs in the early 40s. And as they say, the rest is history. Where did that phrase become so popular? If we count the Mother Goose rendition, certainly in keeping with the sense of things, My earlier supposition that the Serenity Prayer has been around much longer than "it is what it is" holds true. But if we require that the wording of the prayer be a more exact match to today's version, it's a close call. So I'm going with Mother Goose. Now that that mystery has been put to rest, shall I close Google for a lunch break? Apparently not, because there is dilly-dallying and shilly-shallying. I know what it means to occupy oneself with trifles, discovering what I am doing so well at the very moment. I'm thinking I heard the phrase from some vice presidential guy. I doubt it would be Gerald Ford. Too many syllables. I think the phrase is too silly to have escaped Hubert Humphrey's lips. Lyndon Johnson? I tried to translate dilly-dallying and shilly-shallying into Johnson's Texas dialect. It seems impossible that he could have pronounced the phrase without speech therapy. Just to be sure, though, I Google Lyndon B. Johnson quotations. No citing for DD and SS, but I found something that puts him on the it is what it is camp. He said, "Being president is like being a jackass in a hailstorm. There's nothing to do but stand there and take it." Spiro Agnew, why didn't I think of him in the first place? I Googled Spiro Agnew quotations with almost as much zeal as the rats pushing their pleasure center button. It's got to be old Spiro. I know he came up with some doozies like, "Once you've seen one slum, you've seen them all." As with the other Googled vice presidents, I draw a DD and SS blank with Mr. Agnew's quotes too. I am, though, rewarded with a laugh over the reminder of nattering nabobs of negativism. Suddenly, I get one of those gifts from the universe. The dilly-dallying and shilly-shallying speaker was a vice president, only not a U.S. vice president. About 30 years ago, he was the vice president of our local teachers organization. Anyways, this is quick. Anyways, according to Writing Tip blog, is a colloquial corruption of anyway. It might help to remember that anyway is an adverb and adverbs can't be plural. Why didn't I think of that? You're wondering, what does this have to do with gifts of longevity, aren't you? I'll tell you. Time to shilly-shally and dilly-dally is a great gift. Time to follow one's own impulses, to let curiosity be the guide, to take a whole hour or a day or a week to do what one wants. I love this part of being a middle oldster. Sunny lies half asleep, bored, on the chaise near my computer. She needs a walk, so do I. But now I'm wondering where que sera sera fits in the grant me the courage to change in the which I can, and it is what it is timeline. And was that Doris Day or Dinah Shore? Are they still alive? And what about Doozy? And that's the way the cookie crumbles. The answers to those and so many other questions are floating around in Google space, just waiting to be Googled. I'm afraid the rest is history.
Morning, everybody. My mom claims that I was singing the song to her when I was born. Seriously, she's told me my whole life that she heard Ed Ames from that album opening night with Ed Ames singing this song. So it has a big meaning for me. Try to remember the kind of September, when grass was green and grain was yellow. Try to remember the kind of September, when life was slow and oh so mellow. Try to remember the kind of September, when you were a tender and callow fellow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Try to remember when life was so tender that no one wept except the willow. Try to remember when life was so tender that dreams were kept beside your pillow. Try to remember when life was so tender that love was an ember about to billow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, although you know the snow will follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, without a hurt, the heart is hollow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember the fire of September that made us mellow. Deep in December, our hearts should remember and follow. Follow.
Thank you, John. I have a poem to share from Mary Oliver. It's called The Poet with His Face in His Hands. You want to cry aloud for your mistakes, but to tell the truth, the world doesn't need any more of that sound. So if you're going to do it and can't stop yourself, if your pretty mouth can't hold it in, at least go by yourself across the 40 fields and the 40 dark inclines of rocks and water to the place where the falls are flinging out their white sheets like crazy. And there is a cave behind all that jubilation and water fun. And you can stand there under it and roar all you want. And nothing will be disturbed. You can drip with despair all afternoon. And still on a green branch, its wings just lightly touched by the passing foil of water, the thrush, puffing out its spotted breast, will sing of the perfect, stone-hard beauty of everything.
Generosity is a spiritual practice. Our congregation has a practice of giving away half of every Sunday's offering to an organization that is working to make a difference in the world. Oh, it says in May. In June.
In June, it's Mercy Peddlers.
Yes, so that doesn't match because I went with that.
Oh, well, tell them that it's Mercy Peddlers.
In June, it is Mercy Peddlers. Ignore that as far as the community partner, but realize that Mercy Peddlers, we actually saw last Sunday a wonderful video produced by Sister Libby, and we have many Mercy Peddlers here in the congregation that go out Sister Libby goes out daily to provide coffee, conversation, acceptance. They offer things like toothbrushes and toothpaste and socks, and I'm forgetting so many of the other things. So Mercy Peddlers is a fabulous organization that many people here participate in. And now you can turn your phone back on. If you would like to text from your seat, 50% of the offering that is collected today will be given to Mercy Peddlers. Otherwise, you can pay by check or by, it's written off here. Putting money in the basket. So thank you for your generosity here at UUSS and to our community partner, and this morning's offering will now be given and received. Please join me in speaking our unison words of response to the offering. May generosity bless our world, and may gratitude nourish our spirits.
I think we all want to have a good death. And each of us likely have some idea of what that means. Maybe not in detail, but at least in concept. My soon-to-be 98-year-old father thinks about a good death quite a lot. His idea of a good death is minimal suffering, either physical, mental, or emotional. It's a work in progress. So this is our annual service about aging and death. I tied this theme about 8 years ago to our camp time when about 100 of our folks are off camping for the weekend. But it's been a few years since I reflected on the theme because of the pandemic, and I think death was present enough for us during that time to not focus a sermon on it. But here we are. For this year's service, I decided to reflect on regrets. Now, often when I come up with a sermon topic, the universe, my muse, just presents things to me, and I'm driving along minding my own business, and there's this conversation on the radio about regrets and death, and the idea that people who struggle and have an emotional challenge with death at the time of their death are often holding on to a pain about something they did or something they didn't do, and they struggle to let it go. They struggle to release it as they're releasing life. This talk also said that depression is common among the elderly, and regrets play a significant part in that depression. Of course, regrets have implications for our quality of life at many stages. Daniel Pink is an author who I drew a lot from for this sermon. He says that we all have regrets. Unless we're children under 5 who haven't developed the brain capacity to understand regret, people with brain damage who have damage in the area of the brain that manages regret, and sociopaths. And while we all have them, we don't all deal with them in the same way. But Pink argues that dealing with our regrets can improve the quality of our lives and the quality of our deaths. It's not uncommon for people to take an inventory of regrets at certain milestones, sort of those decade birthdays, or a radical change in your circumstance, or when a loved one dies. We review the choices we made, how we have reacted to the challenges that we've been handed, and what we did with the opportunities that were presented to us. There's a wonderful podcast that I've been listening to recently. It's called Wiser Than Me with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She interviews older and wiser women to glean their wisdom. I highly recommend it. Her first interview in the series was with Jane Fonda, 85 years old at the time of the interview. And Fonda said that she sees life in 3 acts: 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, if you're lucky. And she called this 60 to 30 act the 3rd act of life. She recommends that you do a life review as you enter this 3rd act. You can, of course, do a life review at any time, but at 60, you have some wisdom, you have some experience, you have some perspective, and there's more life behind you than there is ahead of you. Fonda says that a life review can give you a fresh perspective and bring clarity and meaning to your past from this vantage point of age. So I Googled life review. And it turns out it's a formal part of therapy. There are therapists who specialize in life review, but you can also do it on your own. And there's lots of material on the internet if this is calling to you. On one side, I found a proposed list of questions that you consider. Here's just a few of them. What are you most proud of? What risks have you taken? How would you like to spend the rest of your life? With a live interview, you can also go back and change your relationship with the past as you consider the circumstances and the context that led to the choices that you made. You may see them a little differently. Processing your regrets is a big part of this idea of life review. So the author Daniel Pink studied regrets for several years and created an online forum where people could share their regrets. 16,000 regrets and counting on his site from 105 countries. And in reviewing these regrets that people posted, he was able to parse them into 4 basic categories of regret. The first are foundational regrets. These are the ones related to choices that you made maybe earlier in your life. Perhaps you didn't save enough for retirement, or you didn't take your education seriously enough, or you didn't take good enough care of your health. You didn't create the foundation in your life that would help you in later life. Regrets of boldness are about that road not taken, that business that you never started, or the travel that you never took, or a love interest that you didn't pursue. I'm going to address this category a little bit, but regrets of boldness are the most poignant of all the regrets. Moral regrets refer to the times when you chose the low road. For example, stealing, cheating, bullying. These can weigh very heavily on us. In the survey that Daniel Pink took, one 71-year-old woman was still carrying a burden of stealing from a store in her neighborhood when she was 8 years old. The final category of regrets are regrets of connection. That friendship that you let lapse, or the disagreement with the relative that didn't get resolved, or the regret that you didn't spend more time with your children when they were younger. So these 4 categories can be kind of useful as we reflect on our regrets, because the antidote can be different in each of these categories. If you regret in your 40s that you haven't saved enough for retirement or haven't finished your education, it might not be too late. You may want to reassess whether that particular thing is worth pursuing. For years, I regretted that I never completed the PhD program that I started in my 20s. But after working in higher education for many years, I realized that I never would have been happy as an academic, and I was able to let that particular regret go. Reflecting on whether that unpursued goal was still a fit is a really good idea to help you let go of those things that perhaps it's too late to fulfill, or you find that it doesn't serve you anymore. Similarly, if you regret not maintaining a relationship, you can consider the value of reconnecting. Many of us feel awkward reaching out to that friend whose email we never answered, or someone that we've lost touch with for a long time. We worry that they're going to say, "Well, where the hell have you been?" But more times than not, it's worth the risk. If you're still carrying someone in your heart after many years, it's worth it to try to reach out and reconnect. Many of us, like the woman with the childhood stealing, carry regrets of lapses in moral judgment, cheating on a spouse or cheating on a test, shoplifting, other moral lapses. And when there's an opportunity to make amends, great. But that's not really often a possibility. I can't go back to the thrifty store of my youth and apologize for the candy bar I stole when I was 10 years old. But you can make amends in other ways, by being grateful and generous. And if your regrets still haunt you, you can put it into perspective of your whole life. Have I usually been a good person? Is this a moral lapse? And if the answer is different, you have an opportunity to change things for yourself. So this brings up a specific type of regret that is particularly haunting. Those regrets of inaction, the if only I had, if only. These are difficult because often the opportunity to take action has passed, especially as we come to the end of our lives. In his study, Pink found that the regrets of inaction, for the choices we didn't make, the opportunities we didn't take, they dominate our feelings over the regrets of action. So the things that we didn't do, our regrets for those, are greater than the regrets we have for things that we did do. For people over 50, the regrets for things they didn't do were twice as common as regrets for actions that they took. So this makes perfect sense. With less time ahead of you and reflecting on your life and where you have been, often we dwell on those roads not taken and imagine how wonderful your life would have been if only. These feelings become more acute at the end of life. I have a list on my refrigerator of the top 10 regrets people make on their deathbeds. It comes from a hospice nurse. And the number one regret people say is, I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. Now, I'm sure the overly enthusiastic among us may say that it's never too late. Obviously, when you're close to death, it is indeed too late. My almost 98-year-old father spends quite a bit of time reflecting on the choices he had made and how they affected his life path. We talk about this together. There's little opportunity in his life and circumstance for him to change any of these things. And it also doesn't mean that thinking about these things doesn't mean he has to stew in them or be stuck in them. In fact, that's what not to do about your regrets. I think that there's a bit of grief that plays into our reflecting on our regrets, reflecting on the choices that we made or the mistakes that we did, grieving the path not taken, or grieving the friendship that can't be renewed. It's important to be honest with ourselves about how our choices affected our lives, and to give ourselves the gift of wholeness at the end of our life by grieving those regrets and letting them go, setting them down. Marilyn looked into that little treasure chest in her heart and found that her anger was gone and it was replaced by gratitude. But it's not the end of the story to grieve our regrets and let them go. We can rewrite or reframe our story. Instead of focusing on what you lost because of your actions or inactions, you can consider the good things that came out of the choices that you made, even if the choices feel like regrets to you. The classic example, of course, is George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. At a traumatic juncture when it appeared that he would have to default on his business to a greedy competitor, George contemplates suicide as he looks at the choices he had made, the choices to stay in his hometown, forgo his education, forgo travel, limiting his life, not letting himself have the life that he had dreamed of. He feels that his life made no difference to him or anyone else. And then an angel comes on the scene and shows George all the ways that the people in his community are better off because of the choices that he made. This helps George reframe his story and find gratitude for the life that he had. He can set down some of these regrets and if onlys in the gratitude of the choices that he made and what they have reaped for himself and for others. So in this process, George shares with Clarence, his angel, a litany of all his regrets. This is so healthy and important. Telling someone about your regrets helps you process them, helps you integrate them. It can reduce any shame you may carry. The person that you share with, of course chosen carefully, can offer you affirmation and clarity, perspective, just like Clarence does for George in the movie. But here's the most critical part of this process of your dealing with your regrets, whether you're 30 or almost 98 years old, is to offer yourself compassion. As you reflect, consider, does this regret define you as a person, or was it just a moral blip? I preached last year about self-compassion and the work of Kristen Neff at UC Berkeley. Her research found that people who addressed their regrets with self-compassion were more likely to change their behaviors and to have a more peaceful passing at the end of life. Self-compassion is a key to processing your regrets and moving forward. Opening up your heart with love can lead to forgiveness. Forgiving yourself, that self who made the choice. Forgiving that self that made that choice that you regret. You owe that to yourself. That self who maybe didn't make the right choices or maybe made the wrong choices. That self who did the best they could. The process of life review may allow you to learn from your mistakes, to change the things you can, but most importantly, it helps you to make peace with yourself, to let go of your burdens, grieve your losses, and create that truly loving home for yourself, within yourself. I wish that for you, for every one of you. I wish you the courage to reflect on your regrets and to offer yourself compassion. I wish you a good death. My father has many regrets, that he chose to go into business with a man that cheated him, that he was not more successful, that he retired too early. He regrets that he couldn't save his brother from drug addiction and early death. I imagine he has other regrets, deeper ones that he doesn't share with his daughter. But we talk. I help him reframe things. He started a business when he was 20 years old and grew it into a community which brought together hundreds of people. My father was a donut maker and owned a donut shop, a vocation that he doesn't hold in very high esteem. And yet the community that he created brought people together, marriages, friendships, commitments, memories, lives changed. And of course, I tell him, if he had made other life choices, he might not have fathered me. That always makes him smile.
Self-love that we experience, we can say that we are willing. I am willing. I am willing, and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It is honor those who go before us, so lift me children see more clearly.
Please join me in the words. We extinguish this flame.
Uh-oh. They don't have it yet. There we have it.
There we go. We extinguish this flame, but not carry the light, love, and commitment of this gathering into the days to come.
Let's open our hearts, open our hands up to the people around you, to our community on Zoom, to our greater community, our interdependent web that connects us all. I wish for you the ability to reflect, to learn from your life. But most importantly, I wish for you to forgive yourself for what needs to be forgiven, to love yourself, to honor yourself, and recognize that the choices you've made, you've done the best that you could. So offer yourself some compassion. Our mission statement says we come together to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world, and this is how you do it. You start with yourself. You start with loving yourself, accepting all that you are, and then you take that loving, accepting self out there and change the world. Blessed be.